Zara's hands trembled as she stood in front of the family lawyer. Her father stared at her coldly. Her brother leaned back with a smirk, and her stepmother whispered, "She doesn't deserve a single coin." Zara swallowed her tears, looked at the document, and whispered, "Dad, don't you know what I found in your old toolbox?" Everyone froze. Zara grew up in a house that never felt like home. When she was small, her father used to lift her onto his shoulders and call her his sunshine. But everything changed after he married Lalama. Overnight, Zara became someone they barely noticed. Lalama's words were like poison, whispered again and again into her father's ears until he started believing them. "She's a burden," Lalama said. "She slows us down." And slowly, Zara watched her father turn cold, distant, and silent whenever she walked into a room. Meanwhile, her brother Nuru lived like a prince. He ate the best food, wore the nicest clothes, and slept in a room filled with new gadgets. Zara wasn't allowed to touch anything of his. She wasn't even allowed to step into the living room when they had guests because Lalama said she brought bad luck. Instead, she slept on a thin mattress in the storage room, squeezed between old boxes and broken furniture. Every night, she curled up under a torn blanket and tried to convince herself she didn't mind. But she did. It hurt more than she ever admitted. During family dinners, they laughed loudly while she ate alone in the kitchen. When she tried to speak, they cut her off. When she worked hard, they ignored it. Lalama treated her like an outsider, and her father let it happen. And Nuru, seeing this, followed their lead and treated Zara like she didn't belong at all. But Zara didn't break. Whenever she felt small or unwanted, she thought of her late mother. She remembered her warm hands, her soft voice, and the way she always said, "You are meant for more, Zara. Never forget that." These memories kept her standing. They reminded her that she once mattered deeply to someone. So she quietly endured every insult, every cold stare, every night on the hard floor. She grew used to doing chores no one thanked her for. She learned to survive on very little. And though her heart often felt heavy, she carried herself with quiet strength. Her mother had loved her fiercely, and Zara held on to that love as tightly as she could. It became her shield, her courage, and the small flame inside her that refused to die, no matter how much the people in her own house tried to dim it. That night, the rain was falling so heavily that Zara's clothes were soaked by the time she reached the front door. She had just finished a long shift at her part-time job, tired and hungry, ready to slip quietly into the house the way she always did. But the moment she touched the doorknob, she heard voices inside. Lalama's voice came first, low and sharp, the kind of voice she used when she wanted something badly. "Once we secure the inheritance," Lalama whispered, "send her away. No girl of hers should claim anything." Zara froze where she stood. Her heart stopped for a moment. She pressed her back against the cold wall outside, scared to breathe too loudly. She waited for her father to speak, to say something, anything to defend her. She hoped he would say, "No, Zara is my daughter. She stays." But he didn't. He stayed silent. A long, painful silence that felt louder than shouting. Zara's stomach tightened. That silence told her everything. He wasn't going to protect her. He wasn't going to fight for her. He was going to let Lalama push her out of the only place she had ever known. The house that still held her mother's memories. The house she tried so hard to belong to. She slowly leaned closer to the door, listening even though her heart already felt bruised. Lalama continued, her voice filled with greed. "She's nothing here. Once the property is in our hands, she should leave. It's better for all of us." Zara waited again for her father's reply. Maybe he would finally speak up. Maybe he just needed a moment. But the only thing she heard was the sound of his breathing. No words. No defense. No love. Her throat tightened as she realized he agreed by staying silent. Zara lowered her head and bit her lip so hard it hurt. She tasted a bit of blood, but it kept her from crying. She didn't want to cry outside the door like a child begging to be let in. She refused to give them that power. She stood there, letting the storm soak her hair and clothes, trying to gather the pieces of her heart that had shattered in just a few seconds. She had always known Lalama didn't want her. She had always known Nuru saw her as nothing. But hearing her father say nothing, that was the deepest cut. It told her that she truly had no one in this house. After a moment, she wiped her face with her wet sleeve, took a deep breath, and pushed the door open quietly. She walked inside with her head held straight, carrying a pain she didn't let anyone see. And for the first time, Zara understood that she needed to protect herself, because no one in that house ever would. The next morning, Zara went to clean the old shed behind the house, the place everyone else avoided because it was full of spiders, dust, and forgotten things. She didn't mind. Cleaning kept her busy, and being alone in the shed felt better than being ignored inside the house. As she moved boxes around, her foot hit something heavy under a pile of old cloth. When she pulled the cloth away, she saw a rusted metal toolbox. It was her father's, the one he used years ago before Lalama came. He used to carry it everywhere, fixing things around the house. But after he changed, the toolbox disappeared, as if the memories inside it were too painful for him to face. Curious, Zara pulled it closer. The lock was weak and broke easily when she tugged it. Inside, she expected to find old tools, but instead, lying on top was a sealed envelope. The paper was yellow with age, but the handwriting on it was clear, her mother's handwriting. Zara's hands trembled as she lifted it. She hadn't seen her mother's writing in so long that just looking at the letters made her eyes sting. She sat on an overturned bucket and opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a letter and a few stamped documents. As she began to read, her breath caught. Her mother wrote about the land, the workshop, and the ancestral business. Everything the family had ever owned. It all belonged to her. Her mother had signed everything under Zara's name before she died. Her mother had planned it, protected it, and made sure Zara would never be left with nothing. But no one opened the will. No one told her. No one even mentioned it. Zara felt her whole world shift. All these years, she thought she had no value in the house. All these years she believed she owned nothing. But her mother had trusted her more than anyone. Her mother had given everything to her. And they hid it. She pressed the letter to her chest, as if she could hold her mother through the paper. For the first time, the weight in her heart felt different. Not heavy with sadness, but strong with purpose. She understood now why Lalama wanted her gone. Why her father stayed silent. Why Nuru acted like everything belonged to him. They knew. Or at least, they feared this truth. Zara stood slowly, folded the letter, and slipped it into her bag. She didn't shout. She didn't run to confront them. She didn't make a scene. She simply walked out of the shed with a calm face and a steady heart. From that moment, her silence was no longer weakness. It was a plan. The day of the inheritance meeting arrived faster than Zara expected. She walked into the lawyer's office quietly, holding her bag close to her side. Her heart was steady, even though she knew what everyone in that room thought of her. Nuru was already sitting there, leaning back in his chair like he owned the place. Lalama sat beside him, dressed in her best clothes, her chin lifted proudly. Zara's father sat with them too, but he didn't look at her. Not even once. The lawyer asked them to begin, and immediately Nuru straightened up. With a confident voice he said, "I'll take the workshop, the land and the accounts. She has nothing to add here." He didn't even glance in Zara's direction. To him, she wasn't part of the discussion. She wasn't part of the family. She was just someone they expected to move aside quietly. Lalama nodded as if everything was already agreed upon. Her smile was full of victory. She had waited for this moment. To her, this was the day Zara would finally be pushed out for good. She even placed a hand on her husband's arm, as if reminding him to stay silent and follow the plan. Zara saw her father's eyes drop to the floor. He didn't argue. He didn't tell Nuru to be fair. He didn't even say Zara deserved something. His silence was worse than anything else. It told her she meant nothing to him compared to the family he chose. The humiliation felt sharp, like something cutting into her chest. She wanted to ask him why he couldn't look at her. She wanted to ask him why he let people treat her like she was invisible. But she didn't speak. She sat still in her chair, hands folded on her lap. On the outside, she looked calm. On the inside, she held on to her mother's letter like a secret shield. She watched Nuru talk as if he had already won. He listed the properties, the accounts, the land, and every item he believed belonged to him. He talked with so much pride that even the lawyer looked surprised. Through all of this, Zara kept her face steady. She didn't argue, didn't defend herself, didn't react. They expected her to break, to cry, to complain. But she didn't give them that satisfaction. Her silence confused them, but she remained still. She knew something they didn't, something that would change everything. And as she sat there in that room full of greed and arrogance, Zara realized one thing clearly. The people who tried hardest to make her feel small were the ones who feared the truth the most. When the lawyer finally turned to Zara and asked if she had any objection, the whole room went quiet. Everyone expected her to shake her head, accept her place, and stay silent like always. But instead, Zara lifted her eyes slowly and smiled. It wasn't a big smile. It was soft, calm, and strangely confident. A smile that didn't fit the moment at all. A smile that made something shift in the room. Nuru frowned immediately. He leaned forward, annoyed, his voice rising. "What are you smiling for? You have nothing." His words were sharp, meant to hurt her, meant to put her back in the corner where they always kept her. Lalama's eyebrows tightened, and even she seemed confused by Zara's quiet confidence. Zara didn't look at Nuru. She didn't look at Lalama either. She turned her eyes to her father, the man who once loved her, the man who now avoided her gaze. Her voice was barely above a whisper, but it carried through the whole room. "Dad, don't you know what I found in your old toolbox?" Her father finally looked up. His face changed. Something deep inside him reacted to her words. Surprise, fear, confusion. He couldn't hide it. Lalama shifted in her seat, suddenly unsure. Even Nuru's anger paused for a moment, replaced by a small flash of worry. The air in the room grew heavy. The lawyer adjusted his glasses, sensing something important was coming. Zara reached into her bag slowly, calmly, as if she had all the time in the world. She placed a sealed envelope on the table. Her mother's handwriting faced upward, clear and unmistakable. The lawyer's eyes widened. He picked up the envelope and examined the seal. His face went pale as soon as he recognized the official stamps and signatures. He looked at Zara with surprise, then at her father, and then back at the envelope. Nuru slammed his hand on the table. "What is that?" he demanded, but there was panic in his voice now. Not anger, fear. Lalama leaned closer, her lips pressed tightly together. She didn't blink. She didn't breathe. She knew this wasn't just a letter. She knew Zara had found something powerful. Something they never wanted her to see. Zara sat back quietly, her hands folded on her lap, the same calm smile resting on her face. She didn't need to say another word. The letter spoke louder than she ever could. For the first time in her life, Zara wasn't the one afraid. They were. The lawyer slowly broke the seal on the envelope, his hands steady but his eyes wide with curiosity. Everyone leaned forward, waiting. Zara sat quietly, her face calm, but her heart beat steadily with certainty. She already knew what was written inside. She had read every word 100 times. The lawyer unfolded the papers and began reading aloud. His voice was clear, leaving no space for confusion. The letter stated that Zara's mother had transferred every major property, the land, the workshop, the ancestral business, the accounts, under Zara's name. It carried her mother's signature. It carried the village chief's witness mark. It carried official stamps proving its full legal power. Nothing was missing. Nothing was unclear. It was complete. For a moment, the room was silent. Then Zara's father's mouth fell open. He looked at the papers as if they were something impossible, as if they couldn't be real. He blinked several times, but the truth stayed the same on the table. He had ignored his daughter for years, choosing greed over love, and now everything he had tried to protect for his new family legally belonged to the daughter he treated like a shadow. Lalama's smile vanished instantly. She had entered that office full of confidence, ready to celebrate her victory. But now her face tightened, and her hands trembled as she stared at the documents. The color drained from her face. She understood exactly what this meant. All her plans, all her manipulation, all her efforts to push Zara out were now useless. Nuru couldn't contain himself. He slammed his hand on the table so hard the pens shook. "This is impossible," he shouted, his voice breaking with anger. "She's lying. This can't be real. I'm the one who should get everything." He looked at the lawyer, desperate for someone to agree with him. But the lawyer simply raised his hand, signaling him to stop. His voice was calm but firm. "It is legally binding," he said. "Everything here is valid, witnessed, stamped, untouched. This inheritance was set by her mother before her passing. And according to this document," he paused, looking directly at Nuru, then at Zara. "It is hers." Nuru's chest rose and fell rapidly. Lulama clenched her jaw, fighting the urge to scream. Zara's father lowered his head, unable to meet her eyes. The truth had finally come out, sharp enough to cut through every lie and every plan they had made. Zara didn't gloat. She didn't smile. She simply sat quietly as the weight of their greed fell back onto them. The truth had spoken for her. Nuru couldn't contain himself. He jumped to his feet, his face red, his fists clenched. Dad, how could you let this happen? This is insane. She has nothing coming to her, he shouted, his voice echoing in the lawyer's office. He slammed his hands on the table, scattering papers, but the lawyer raised a hand to calm him. His anger didn't scare anyone anymore. It only made them look smaller in that moment. Lulama leaned forward, her eyes blazing. This is all your fault, she snapped at Zara's father. If you had listened to me, none of this would have happened. You let her take what's not hers. Her voice was sharp, biting, full of blame and regret disguised as outrage. But her words didn't move him. He just stared at the floor, unable to lift his eyes to his daughter. Zara could see the shame and fear flickering across his face. A mixture of guilt and realization that he had lost control over everything he thought he owned. Zara stood up slowly, holding the letter carefully in her hands. Her heart was steady, her mind clear. She looked at her father and then at Nuru and Lulama. The room felt suffocating with their anger, greed, and panic, but she felt lighter than she had in years. She didn't shout, she didn't argue, she didn't cry. She just spoke softly, but every word cut through the chaos like a knife. I asked for love, not land, she said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. I asked for your care, your protection, your trust. You gave me neither. She held their eyes for a moment, letting the weight of her words sink in. Her father's shoulders slumped. Nuru's fists trembled. Lulama's mouth opened, then closed, as if she had lost her power to fight. Zara picked up the envelope, the symbol of all her mother's love and foresight, and held it close to her chest. She didn't look back. She walked toward the door with steady, quiet steps. Each step felt like freedom, like a weight lifting from her shoulders. No one moved to stop her. No one dared. For the first time in her life, Zara wasn't running from them, hiding from them, begging for their approval. She was leaving on her own terms, with her dignity intact, with her truth in her hands. As the door closed softly behind her, the silence in the room was deafening. They were left with their anger, their guilt, and the chaos they had created themselves. Zara walked away with calm certainty, and in that moment, she finally felt the strength of being untouchable. Zara returned to the workshop that had belonged to her mother, a place full of dust, old tools, and memories of better times. It smelled of wood and oil, and sunlight fell through the broken windows, lighting up the worn benches. She looked around and felt a spark in her chest. This was hers now, not just the land or the building, but a space where she could build something of her own, something no one could take from her. She started small. She cleaned every corner, sharpened the old tools, and fixed the machines that had been left to rust. Every plank of which she touched reminded her of her mother's care, her mother's strength, and the way she had believed in Zara even when no one else did. Slowly, the workshop began to take shape, like a hidden promise finally coming to life. Zara didn't just build furniture, she built opportunity. She hired young people from the village who had no work, who were overlooked like she had been. She trained them patiently, teaching them how to measure, cut, and craft with care. She especially focused on young girls, showing them that they could be strong, skilled, and independent. Watching them grow made her feel proud, stronger than any anger or pain she had carried for years. Word spread quickly. People came from nearby towns to see the furniture she created. Every chair, table, and cabinet carried the touch of her hands, the love of her craft, and the dedication she poured into her work. Customers were impressed not just by the quality, but by the story behind it. A young woman who had overcome everything and created beauty from struggle. Her business grew steadily, not because she wanted revenge on her father, her brother, or Lulama, but because she refused to waste her pain. Every hardship she had endured became fuel for her determination. Every insult, every moment of being ignored or humiliated, was turned into precision in her work, care in her training, and pride in what she built. Months turned into years, and the small workshop became a studio respected far beyond her town. Her reputation wasn't built on fear or anger, but on skill, honesty, and the courage to keep going. Zara had taken the land her family tried to deny her and transformed it into a symbol of strength and hope. For the first time, she felt fully free. She wasn't defined by the cruelty of others anymore. She was defined by her own hands, her own heart, and the life she had chosen to create. Every chair she polished, every young apprentice she guided, and every table she finished reminded her of one truth: she could rise above anything, and no one could ever take that away. Months had passed since Zara had walked out of the lawyer's office, and her studio had grown into something far beyond what anyone in her family could have imagined. The workshop was full of life, apprentices moving carefully between benches, the smell of polished wood in the air, and the sound of laughter mixing with the hum of machines. Zara moved confidently among her team, guiding them, teaching them, and making sure every piece of furniture reflected the care she put into it. She had built more than a business. She had built a life she could be proud of. One quiet afternoon, the bell above the studio door rang. Zara looked up and froze for a moment. Standing in the doorway were her father and Nuru. The same men who had ignored her, humiliated her, and tried to erase her from her own family now looked nervous, hesitant, and small. Her father's shoulders were slumped, his eyes avoiding hers. Nuru stood beside him, his confident arrogance replaced by uncertainty. Her father stepped forward, voice low and trembling. "Zara, forgive us. We need help," he whispered, as if saying it out loud might make it more believable. Every word carried regret, fear, and desperation. Zara looked at them calmly. She wiped the sawdust from her hands with her apron, her movements slow and deliberate, as if she had all the time in the world. She didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. She simply met their eyes, the same way she had once hoped her father would see her when she was a child. "I can help anyone," she said softly, her voice steady, "except the people who broke me on purpose." She let the words hang in the air, sharp and clear. There was no anger in her voice. No shouting. No tears. Just a quiet strength that made them shrink under her gaze. Her father's lips trembled, but he could not speak. Nuru's face twisted, trying to mask panic as he realized there was nothing they could demand from her. Zara stepped aside, letting them enter the studio if they wished, but she didn't invite them. She didn't offer warmth or forgiveness. She didn't need to. Her boundaries were clear, and they were stronger than any words could be. This was the power she had earned, not through revenge, not through anger, but through living her life fully, refusing to let the past control her. She gave them nothing but the truth. She would protect herself, her work, and her peace above anyone who had ever tried to harm her intentionally. For the first time, Zara understood the strength of saying no without guilt. She understood that love and trust had to be earned, and cruelty could never be forgiven lightly. And in that quiet studio, surrounded by the life she had built, she stood taller than ever before, untouchable and free. Years later, Zara stood at the entrance of her studio, the morning sun shining on polished wood and freshly finished furniture. The workshop buzzed with energy, apprentices laughing as they worked, customers walking in with admiration, and the smell of sawdust and varnish filling the air. Zara paused for a moment, taking it all in. This was her world now, built from her own hands, her own strength, and her own determination. People around her respected her deeply. They listened when she spoke, followed her guidance, and trusted her judgment. She was valued not because of who her father had been or what her family tried to take from her, but because she had proven herself, quietly and steadily day after day. Young girls she had trained now worked confidently at her side, learning not just carpentry but courage and self-respect. Zara's eyes drifted to her office wall, where her mother's letter was framed. The paper was yellowed with age, but the handwriting was unmistakable. She smiled softly, not for the wealth it represented, not for the land or the workshop, but because it had saved her from losing herself. Her mother had believed in her when no one else did. That belief had been a shield, a guide, and a spark that had carried her through every hardship. She walked past the apprentices and the tools, letting her fingers brush the smooth wood of a table she had just finished. She breathed in deeply, the air heavy with the scent of her work, her effort, and her freedom. The past, the betrayal, the humiliation, the years of feeling invisible, felt like a distant shadow now. It had shaped her, yes, but it no longer controlled her. Zara whispered softly to herself, almost as if speaking to the ghosts of her past. I didn't take revenge. I simply became someone your cruelty could never reach. Her voice was calm, steady, and final. It carried no anger, no bitterness, no need to prove anything to anyone. She had built a life they could not touch, a life they could not diminish, a life that reflected her true worth. The studio was full of life, respect, and purpose, the kind of life her mother had dreamed for her. Zara smiled again, quietly, feeling a deep peace she had never known as a child. She didn't need charity, foundations, or approval from anyone who had hurt her. She had everything she needed already: herself, her skills, her dignity, and the people who believed in her. For the first time, Zara truly understood what it meant to be untouchable, not through wealth or revenge, but through becoming whole, strong, and free. She had earned this ending, one no one could take away.